Welcome to Module 5 of the Hare training series. This module focuses on the equity dimension through subgroup analysis. Our learning objectives are to explain why disaggregation is essential, identify the 9 analyzed subgroups, compare performance using the Hare framework, analyze the female paradox and the English learner exception, and recognize that negative growth is systemic. Disaggregation matters because aggregate scores mask significant inequities. For example, a district average of 201 hides a 47-point range between English learners at 187 and not economically disadvantaged students at 234. We analyzed 9 subgroups using the same methodology: all students, male, female, white, Hispanic, economically disadvantaged, not economically disadvantaged, English learners, and students with disabilities. Note that English learners are the only subgroup with positive growth. The methodology involves 3 steps: calculate the gap to proficiency, convert it to school years, and apply the Hare proxy for near zero or negative growth. The English learner subgroup is the only one where the proxy is not applied due to positive growth. This chart shows the scale score gap to proficiency, where the target is 238. English learners have the largest gap at 51 points, but they also have a positive effect size. The not economically disadvantaged subgroup has the smallest gap at 4 points. The baseline for all students shows a 2024 score of 201, a negative effect size of -0.71 sigma, and a gap to proficiency of 27.84 sigma. Applying the Hare proxy yields a timeline of 1,120 school years to reach proficiency. Male students scored 199, which results in a larger raw gap of 39 points compared to all students. While the effect size is the same, differences in standard deviation lead to a shorter Hare timeline of 580 years. Female students scored slightly higher at 202. However, with a near zero effect size of -0.05 sigma, their projected timeline for improvement is significantly worse at 1,370 years. This is the female paradox: better score but worse trajectory. The female paradox highlights the core issue. Female students have a better score of 202 compared to 199 for males, but their near zero effect size results in a much longer timeline of 1,370 years versus 580 years for males. The paradox is explained by noting that better scores can mask worse long-term trajectories. A student with zero growth is in a worse position than a student with negative growth that might be reversed. The framework reveals where a subgroup is going, not just where it stands today. Economically disadvantaged students have a raw score of 193, a 45-point gap to proficiency, and a larger G2P of 28.45 sigma than all students. Yet, their timeline is shorter at 269 years. This is due to a larger standard deviation in their score distribution, which affects the proxy calculation. The standard deviation is not just a detail. It fundamentally shapes timelines. A larger SD means each sigma unit represents more scale points, translating the same raw gap into fewer sigma units. This shifts the timeline, highlighting why comparing raw gaps alone is misleading. The not economically disadvantaged subgroup, the most advantaged, scores 234, just 4 points from proficiency. Yet their effect size is negative at -0.53 sigma. They are the closest to the goal, but are still moving backward. This systemic finding shows that negative growth is not just a poverty or demographic problem. When even the most advantaged subgroup shows negative growth, the root cause is in the system itself. English learners are the exception. They have the lowest score, 187, meaning the largest gap. However, they are the only subgroup with a positive growth effect size of +0.12 sigma. This positive trajectory reduces their timeline dramatically, proving that growth direction, not gap size, determines outcomes. Comparing English learners to all students highlights this. ELs have the worst current score but the best projected timeline of 25 years at a 0.25 sigma standard, compared to 1,120 years for all students. The single factor making the difference is positive growth. This is the EL proof. Same district, same assessment, same target. ELs have positive growth, +0.12 sigma, and a 25-year timeline. All students have negative growth, -0.71 sigma, and a 1,120-year timeline. The only difference is growth direction. Possible factors contributing to EL students' positive growth include targeted language acquisition programs, structured literacy interventions, a natural language growth trajectory for immersion students, federal Title III funding, and mandated instructional supports. This full solution table shows all subgroups and their projected years to proficiency across different growth standards. Note the English learners row. Their positive growth results in the shortest timelines across all positive growth standards. This heat map visualizes the time to proficiency. Darker red means more years, while green means fewer years. English learners stand out as green across all standards, while the female subgroup shows the deepest red at the Hare-Hale threshold, despite moderate scores. Counterintuitive finding 1. Gap size does not equal timeline length. English learners have the largest gap, 51 points, but the shortest timeline, 25 years. Not economically disadvantaged students have the smallest gap, yet still show negative growth. The gap alone does not determine the timeline. Growth does. Counterintuitive finding 2. Higher scores can mean longer timelines. Female students score higher, 202, than male students, 199. However, female students' near zero negative effect size results in a timeline of 1,370 years, much worse than the 580 years for males. The score tells you where you are, but the effect size tells you where you're going. Counterintuitive finding 3. Growth direction trumps everything. Positive growth, even if small, like plus 0.12 sigma for ELs, yields a short 25-year timeline. Negative growth, even near zero, like minus 0.05 sigma for females, results in a timeline of 1,370 years. Positive growth is infinitely better than negative growth. The data proves 5 key findings. Growth direction is the primary determinant. Gap size is misleading. Negative growth is systemic. Positive growth transforms outcomes, as seen with ELs. And the Hare-Hale framework reveals truth's aggregate data heights. The equity implications are clear. Disadvantaged subgroups face a compound effect. Large gaps plus negative growth, leading to exponentially longer timelines. Equity requires targeting growth, not just closing gaps. The EL subgroup demonstrates that prioritizing growth can overcome large gaps. Let's review a practice problem. Subgroup X has a lower score of 210 but positive growth. Subgroup Y has a higher score of 220 but negative growth. Which subgroup has a shorter timeline to proficiency at 0.25 sigma? Subgroup X's positive growth means the proxy does not apply, resulting in a timeline of about 75 years. Subgroup Y's negative growth triggers the proxy, inflating the timeline to 400 years. Subgroup X, despite the lower score, has the shorter timeline because of its positive growth. For further consideration, we've provided 4 discussion questions. These questions explore the implications of the EL exception, how policy can prioritize growth, the allocation of resources, and the systemic nature of negative growth. To summarize, Module 5, aggregate data masks inequities. Growth direction is key. ELs prove positive growth works, better scores can mask worse trajectories, and negative growth is systemic. Join us next for Module 6, the root cause theory.